o'clock, and we have a little bit of tidying up of the room to do before we do that. So we'd like to get going with our afternoon. So, Robin.
Yes. So I'd like to welcome everybody back. Hopefully there's not too much of a food coma after lunch and we still have energy. To begin though, I would like to first introduce someone special who will welcome us to from the Surrey SFU side of things. Joanne Curry, she's the current VP External Relations at Stanford Fraser University and has been since 2016. And has been involved in government and community engagement communications, not only for the Surrey but Vancouver campuses, and involved in initiatives like the SFU Public Square, galleries. I have to admit, I was really impressed with just the complete background of things that you've accomplished. Other initiatives include the Woodward's cultural units. I'm not going to read through all of the SFU positions she's represented, but impressive. I do have to say though, as a researcher, it is nice, as well as a young researcher working on a PhD, it is really nice to know that she has been recently, or you recently finished looking at, 2 years ago, she completed her doctorate thesis at the University of Bath and was awarded a top prize, so the Richard and Shirley Lockett Prize, I believe, looking at university relations and local governments. So there's some real strong expertise here as to how we can use education and practice as a nexus for creating synergies. Without further ado, though, I know that you have a few words as well as pictures. I'm going to pass it on to Joanne, and yeah, thanks.
Great. Well, thank you, Robin, and thanks, Robin and Meg, for producing such an amazing workshop. I attended the first session just before lunch, and just the cross-section of so many great municipalities with researchers, with sister institutions from across the province, and more importantly, students is just really impressive, particularly on this topic area. I wanted to extend a special welcome to all of the students of the Technical University of Dortmund. And actually, we're older than you. There's not many universities in the world because we're a young university at Simon Fraser University. We just turned 50. I know we look younger, but we just turned 50. It's exciting to be part of a young institution. And we're also really fortunate because we have 3 beautiful campuses. So I understand that you traveled to the SFU Surrey campus, which is a brand new campus that was announced in 2002, so it's had a very rapid 15-year history. We have the Vancouver campus, which is about 27 years old in downtown Vancouver. And we love these campuses because they're so embedded with the community and they result in different issues, different relationships and opportunities for our students and faculty. And our main university is up top Burnaby Mountain. There's not too much snow left there. I hope you do make it up to visit. And that's another great, beautiful campus as well. I was just going to take a couple of minutes because we are in Surrey. We're next to the SFU Surrey campus, which I was employee number 1 in 2002. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of historical photos, just a couple of images, because I think it is probably one of the most unusual campus developments that I've come across. I'd love if anyone's come across anything stranger. So what it began as is a dead shopping mall. There's a lot of these shopping malls that just, other shopping malls were built with all the cool stores, and basically it was a dying, they sold black velvet paintings and, things like that. And so with the foresight of the city of Surrey, the province, they decided to take that shopping center and completely reinvent it. So rather than knock it down so this was a before picture. I think this was taken in the late 90s. And so this was the dying shopping center and, very much a car mentality, lots of parking lots and with cars. And this is what happened. They took the existing roof of the shopping center, took it off, built and designed, and it's Bing Tom and Associates is an architect, and basically built 150,000 square foot, 3-story Galleria and suspended it and put it on top of the existing shopping center. So incredible foresight, and so it was all working well. And here's the building that was built across, and so this is the Galleria. So it was at the level of the parkade, again 150,000 square feet, so very large Galleria. A tower, an office tower, with about 1 million square feet, and then a mezzanine that sort of connected. And so it created this mixed-use complex, office tower, shopping center, revived, brew pub, important, as well as a space for a university. So it was all a great plan. And then the government decided to close down the university that was going to locate there. ICBC, which is our auto insurance company, decided not to locate there. And so basically you had a vacant project. And I don't know how many people here have seen Batwoman with Halle Berry. Yes. That was the only thing that was happening in someone has seen it. I watched it just because that was about the only thing that occurred for years in this building. So fast forward, and it was really fortunate. I wasn't the decision maker. Simon Fraser University decided to take a risk, a big risk, and locate a brand new campus in this particular building in a shopping center. And so early days, just tons of skeptics about that. There were some really good reasons besides the shopping center to locate in Surrey. And I think you heard a little bit of context of Surrey, BC's second largest city, fastest growing community, a really exciting place to be, and a whole redevelopment of the downtown area, which used to be known as the car theft capital of Canada because of the number of car thefts. And so it was a bit of a rough area. So it really was a leap of faith for the university. I heard some people nodding, or saw some people nodding there. I'm going to just fast forward. So again, I know the Technical University Dortmund has a very top architectural school, and Bing Tong Architects recently passed away, but just a phenomenal vision for a mixed-use complex. And so I think there's just a couple of photos here I was going to show you before you can get on with your program. And so this is the shopping center here, arcade with the suspended Galleria, and tremendous opportunity for students. I get no food service complaints, wonderful food court, restaurants, shopping stores, T&T supermarket with cheap sushi. So it's just been a wonderful marriage. The office tower after the university came into being, now completely occupied, companies moving in. Within probably, it took about maybe 5-6 years, 25 different residential towers forming a donut, and many of them saying, proximity to the university is one of their many selling features that was important. Since then, and I think these are some of the things that we got a hard time in the early days. What's a reputable university going into a shopping center? So we argued, of course, it was close to the people and very convenient. So I'm just going to see if there's a picture of City Hall here. So this is the interior of the campus, and the exterior, and again spilling out into the neighborhood, wonderful opportunities. Amazing partnership with the City of Surrey, which really did inspire my thesis work. That's why I did the thesis, because I had no idea what could be accomplished with the university and a city partnering until this relationship. So it was a phenomenal study. Tons of projects, tons of lessons learned. We had a hockey team for a little while, no longer. Since the university was built, the City of Surrey, same architect, a beautiful library that you'll see over here, the Surrey City Centre Library, another phenomenal opportunity. And where we sit now is just beyond those balloons in the new City Hall. So all of this is accomplished in 15 years, which for maybe some residents, longtime residents, seems like a long time, but it's just been phenomenal. The City Centre Tower next door as well is also soon to be open. So I guess I just wanted to mention that our tagline of our university is engaging the world. So workshops like these are just phenomenal opportunities for our students and faculty to meet with others. We also believe, I love the term resilience, because I think the SFU Surrey campus story was all about responding, adapting, going from a very small model and adapting with what was needed. And I just wanted to thank you for listening to me for a few minutes, letting me show some photos, and I'll look forward to listening to the next session.
Okay, thank you. So SFU basically gave Surrey the courage to locate here, is that?
Or vice versa. It's hard to, we thank each other. I think it was a big show.
Okay, thanks. So we're now going to move to our third panel of the day, and our second one, or our first and only panel this afternoon. And so we've heard from researchers doing research on and with municipalities and with other levels of government related to resilience and climate change. We've heard from municipalities themselves about where they have found scope for action on this agenda, and this panel is about listening to working folks, people who are working directly in the private sector or with private sector clients, and hearing from you guys what it is that this notion of resilience changes for your line of business. And so, Jeff, I have you down as speaking first. I don't think you have slides, is that correct?
Well, actually, I do. We put it on. It's on the.
Oh, it's there.
It's on,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, let me. What do you think they're called?
You look on directly. Is it that one right
No, that's not it. This is what I for. Who did it for you? These are the ones that are open. And this is the folder for the
there?
day.
You know what I'm going to do this one?
Oh, I don't. No, that's not reading. I think that's a mouse. Oh, what else might it have gone to?
I should put it on the desktop.
Okay, so let's just look. Desktop, here we go. JB.
No, let me just see.
That's mine, yeah.
Let me just see.
Okay, wait a second, then it might be Jeff's speech. Got it.
We got it. Okay.
Okay, so first up then is Jeff Fisher with the Urban Development Institute.
Is there a clicker? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I tried to give it to you.
Thanks, Meg. First, let me tell you a bit about ourselves. The Urban Development Institute represents the development industry in British Columbia. We focus on educating our members, policy development, and communicating on behalf of the industry. And as you can see, we're a pretty significant industry in British Columbia. And as you heard this morning, I think we're the good guys, apparently. This quote here is actually a long-standing mission statement of the Urban Development Institute. We've been involved in discussions with governments on sustainability, adaptability, green buildings for well over a decade. And you can see some of the activities that we've been involved in over the years. For developers, the priority of resiliency is less clear. For many developers, especially this project here, which is Harborside in North Vancouver, it's really important because they're on the water. There's a myriad of municipal requirements, and just so you know, one of the questions was, how important are municipal priorities? Absolutely important. I don't get my permits, I don't get my approvals unless I meet municipal requirements. In addition, I would point out this is done by Concert Properties, and they're a long-term owner of commercial space, industrial space. They have thousands of rental units across the country. So for them, resiliency is really important because they want to protect those long-term assets. I would also say for a lot of projects like this that are phased in over 10 or 20 years, resiliency is going to be important because things are going to change, and I'll get to that a bit later. For a lot of our members, though, who maybe aren't on the water or in areas where there's a lot of climate change requirements, it's probably less of a priority. And for many, they're handing over the projects to stratas, so they're not long-term owners. They're also in a highly leveraged and risk industry, so they are extremely focused on their immediate projects. And I would also say there's a problem in terms of consumer preference. The focus for many is the marble countertops, the stainless steel appliances, less resiliency, less on energy efficiency. In fact, many want to live close to the water. The prices of Vancouver waterfront property is in the new developments is up over $2,000 a square foot in some cases. So there's a real push on that. I don't think the consumers have got the message yet. Now this is a demonstration of what our members think about municipal green building and sustainability. That's really bylaws. One of the issues that we have is in many cases they seem to be going in very different directions. And that's very frustrating to our members because they operate in multiple jurisdictions and there seem to be all sorts of different rules. So they don't understand why flood construction levels are different when you're only a few miles apart. They don't understand why the rules, actually more importantly, why the rules are different. So in some municipalities you can tank electrical and mechanical infrastructure, in others you can't, and that's a bit of a problem. I would also say there's a problem over time. I mentioned the phasing of the projects. You can have flood construction levels that change over the 20 years that a project's built. That does great damage to the streetscape. It also creates potentially internal flooding problems because you have some buildings at higher flood construction levels than others. So guess where the water flows. So from our perspective, there's much more of an interest in having a larger provincial role in terms of this. I think the province has sort of stepped back too much on it, and I think the federal government also needs to stand up to this because they've also got a lot of Portland. They have a lot of interest. And our concern is if they don't, this is what's going to happen. So this is Harborside, which has actually put in a whole bunch, or is going to be putting in a whole bunch of flood mitigation measures. However, in a flood event, it's still going to be, it's going to become an island. And the reason is the properties around it aren't necessarily going to basically introduce flood mitigation measures. And I don't think municipalities are necessarily in the position to actually handle this because, you know, it's, I think in Metro Vancouver, the tab is $9+ billion. And so for a level of government that only gets 8 cents of every tax dollar, it's going to be really hard for them to have the resources to do this. I would also say it's politically extremely difficult, unless it's a redevelopment scenario, for you to push other owners basically to basically introduce flood mitigation measures onto their properties. Now, will senior governments act? I think they really have to because at the end of the day, if there is a major flood event, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars in damage, and they're on the hook to do it. I mean, you saw what happened in Calgary. This is an interesting issue in terms of what happens on the ground. So you can see that the retail is disconnected from the street. And why is that? Well, it's at a different flood construction level than the road. So you've got a real streetscape problem here. Now, one of the things we're looking at potentially is do you have increase the height of the retail so that over time, when the older street rises, basically it can basically be accommodated. And through time, basically, at least you have an interesting streetscape. I would just like to go over the split incentive problem. So over the lifespan of a project, climate resiliency and green building policies actually save money. The problem is to the initial owner of the project, the benefits are small and the costs are high. So to sort of deal with this split incentive problem, you have to look at potentially offering incentives, and they can be financial, but the bigger one actually would be density or processing time improvements. The other thing is financial mechanisms. It doesn't actually have to cost governments a lot of money because you can spread the costs over time. And if you through PACE or on-bill financing. The other thing is our energy costs are way too low in Canada. Why are our German friends so far ahead of us when it comes to energy efficiency? They have high energy prices, so the consumers there are much more interested in energy efficient buildings. That isn't the case here. Another issue I would sort of say we have to look at in the future is DCCs. Those are the things that actually fund a lot of the infrastructure around growth. Now, they're likely going to have to, that's going to be a question I'd be interested in hearing from the municipal folks, is what's going to happen with DCCs? I mean, the pipes are going to have to be climate resilient. Are there going to be higher costs? Are we going to find ways to maybe offset some of the money the development industry gives municipalities and other ways to help fund that? That's going to be an interesting future discussion. With regard to human resources, I don't think we as an industry actually have to hire new people. I think it's actually we have to train our people. For us, I think UDI has a role here in terms of seminars on climate change. I think we need to teach our members where to buy land and where, more importantly, not to buy land. Also, they need to know a lot more about climate change regulations so that they can basically hire the right consultants, ask the right questions, write the correct briefs on their projects. And I think that's more where I think we're going to be going. The last slide here, just some quick best practices. Early warning is essential to the development industry. A lot of the financial arrangements for projects happen early on. It's really difficult to change them later on. Flood mapping, I'll let Norma, that's her baby. I would also say densification and transit-oriented development. We don't have a lot of land in the Lower Mainland. I think, Meg, you felt 9% of the land is greenfield. That's likely to be reduced even more.
Is actually it's designated urban. You
Yeah.
got it reversed.
Yeah. So we're actually going to probably have more of that stripped out because of the increasing floodplains related to climate change. The point here is we're going to have to build on the land that we've got now. A lot of it's going to be infill. I think 75% of the new development between now and 2040 is going to have to be infill. And so we're going to have to look at densification. The good news is, as pointed out earlier this morning, through redevelopment, you can actually build out of some of the floodplains. One of the things I pointed out in the previous slide, or from the previous things, they had actually single-family homes and what you could do with them in terms of flood construction levels. Ideally, what you might want to take a look at is not replacing single-family homes with single-family homes, but single-family homes with multifamily homes. You can use the lift to actually, the land lift is to actually lift the units. Now, the regional growth strategy, there's some issues around that we have to take a look at. The energy step code, that's the provincial policy that's going to get us as an industry from where we are now to near zero buildings in 15 years. That's the plan. My hope is that is going to be something that's going to be workable between the municipalities, the province, and the industry. I do have questions about whether urban design panels and neighborhoods are going to accept buildings that look different than the ones we've got in the city of Glass. I also wonder if consumers are going to be open to purchasing units in these buildings. I mean, that's something we have to take a look at. Finally, I would say flexibility is really critical around energy codes, etc. What we found is that we had a breakfast with Tesla. They're doing a building battery. It looks like a game changer. In the future, we could be having windows that are solar panels. Just as climate change is evolving, so is building science, and we have to have building regulations that reflect that. Anyways, thanks.
Great. Thank you. Now, Peter Whitelaw from Modus Consulting.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so Jeff, you're the good guys. That's fantastic. It's actually not far from the truth. I think one of the things about the development industry is they are actually one of the ways that a huge amount of money gets funneled into the development and redevelopment of our cities. And if we didn't have that money available to us, there's a pile of things we couldn't do. So in many senses, the development industry is the good guys. The question in some ways is how to align the work you do with community priorities and needs and find ways to make the money work. I'm a consultant who specializes in sustainability. I'm going to take a step back and pretend to be an academic for a second, because a number of discussions this morning were around the relationship of sustainability and resilience. And I want to talk briefly about how I see them as fitting together and the value that I think both bring. So I'm going to take a bit of a sidestep from the questions we were asked to talk about, and then I'll briefly talk a little bit about my experience in resilience and sustainability and how they relate to my work. So this is how I define sustainability. It's a high bar. I hope I'm never going to be that guy jumping over the bar. But the point about sustainability is it's a very, very long-term vision. It literally, the emotional content of it, Hogan and Associates some years ago did a study and found the emotional content of the word sustainability is hope. So it is actually somewhat undefinable. At the same time, what it is about is high levels of performance across the range of values or the range of characteristics that describe great communities, if we're thinking about sustainable communities. So it's an endpoint, hence the star on the right-hand side of the slide. What we talk about most often, I think, as professionals is not sustainability, but sustainable development. For me, sustainable development is a process of getting from here to there. And most of the conversation that I heard this morning is, in fact, about principles of sustainable development as I understand them. This image is here really to illustrate that sense of local and global, and I'll leave it at that. But what I would like to just go through quickly is what I consider a now familiar list, and you'll see concepts or terms from people's discussions this morning. First of all, it's long-term thinking. Clearly, if we're dealing with climate change and sea level rise, it's at least 100 years, if not 200 or 300 years. That's 95 years longer than a business cycle, right? So very, very new. Comprehensive thinking, so thinking about environmental, social, economic things. Also thinking about governance and how people work together. Not looking at a single objective of, say, a financial benefit, but considering a whole range of those things. Similarly, not thinking about my own benefit alone, but thinking about the benefit for myself and other organizations and other people. For me, sustainability is about optimization. So it's thinking about multi-objective thinking. I'm forgetting names from this morning's sessions, but the idea of considering in the Vancouver study, Tamsin study, great, multiple accounts evaluation and looking at trade-offs between different aspects now and over the time period of the project. Leveraging capital flows. So again, they're good guys. If you are developing pretty close to a dike, it's, you can spend money dealing with structural fill and so on. It may actually be less expensive to use the building essentially as part of the diking and protection structures than to build a separate dike. And so that investment and leveraging those investments is critical. And similarly, matching replacement cycles over a long, long time scale. Again, this is long-term thinking, and it's optimizing both financial flows, but it's also thinking about how do we get benefits from the dike in terms of environmental, say, ecosystem function, in terms of recreational access, in terms of building and asset protection. Systems thinking, again, thinking about a whole host of things: cultural change, financial incentives, regulatory and policy changes, the physical ways people move and live in cities, and how that affects how they think, and in turn, how they support different discussions. And lastly, the governance piece, collaboration and engagement, actually hearing from different people about their perspectives, learning and building that in to create better and better systems. So for me, this is what sustainable development is about. For me, adaptation and resilience is a critical part of that long-term thinking. It is actually about thinking about things that might hit us that we don't know, about managing through uncertainty over a longer term, and not really knowing, but developing plans in order to address those things we don't know about. So that's kind of how I see those two fitting in. This was a quick few slides thrown together at lunch just to give you a sense of that. So I hope that was helpful. I want to illustrate something we did on the MyPG project, which maybe illustrates the way we were looking at 3 different development scenarios. We actually looked at 4 different development scenarios, and we did what are called sort of future scenario planning scenarios. So we looked at what the future might look like, 4 different kinds. We looked at strategies and evaluated them on multiple accounts evaluation. And then we also asked how robust those strategies were depending on those different future scenarios. So we ended up with a sustainability plan that both was comprehensive in the sense of addressing many public values, and it was robust over a long period of time. The last thing I'd say about that, and I think again it comes back to the good guys, is we were trying to be very, very clear about the interests of the people that were major players in town. So really trying to understand at a policy level what developers needed in order to be able to make a shift in their business models to deliver on what the community said it needed and wanted. So thinking again about the tools I think that Jeff represented, and those are supporting both resilient strategies as well as sustainable strategies. Now, my experience with resilience, I think this sums up my response to the questions we were asked. As a sustainability professional, I think I've described a little bit about how I see it fitting in with the work that I do. But to me, it's just part of that. For me, resilience and climate resilience in particular is both about being prepared for and responding to shorter term, unpredictable, say, weather events and this kind of thing, or earthquake disasters like that, but also about those sort of slow moving, long-term things like sea level rise and changes in climatic conditions. And so it's kind of two very different pieces. It's about physical things, but it's critically about the socioeconomic pieces and how our society fits together and works and how it responds when something happens. And I think the Calgary floods is a brilliant example of that, in the sense of a city that had a pretty good emergency response plan, but when their first flood hit, the community came together. And in contrast to my experience this winter with people not cleaning their sidewalks on my street, Calgary's community came together and helped each other in a huge, very amazing way. And the city then went to town over the next number of years to further develop that capacity and those community connections. And when the second flood hit, they were ready. So for me, that's an extraordinary piece that I have seen, but not been a piece of our core work. And I'd say my sense is that that's a bit of a gap in the work that's done, that I at least see, is the sort of social side of community resilience and that culture of helping each other. To me, an investment in that side of it can mean that vulnerable populations are actually much less vulnerable, and we need less investment as a result into supporting them through emergency social services and centers and that kind of thing. Is resilience on my agenda? Yeah, absolutely. But it's a piece of the sort of inch-deep, mile-wide sustainability agenda, and it's something that I try to bring into that. I do want to highlight that Stephen Shepard's work in Kelowna with the tree canopy cover and the hot areas on the block that he showed, this kind of thing, actually hit on health in the heat piece. As was pointed out, the biodiversity piece, absolutely. There's some real synergies between the things that we're doing in terms of climate resilience and other things that people really value or need to have in their lives. And so that is a segue for me into the work that bonus time. I'll be very quick. The work that I do with small communities, and I'm working with Valley View in northwestern Alberta, which is an oil and gas town. I can promise you I have not mentioned the words climate, sustainability, or resilience ever in that community with the public. But I can talk to them about independence, freedom, ability to lead their own lives and drive their own economy. I can talk to them about making sure that when the oil and gas industry goes down, that something else is there to keep them up. And I can talk to them about the importance of the connections that they have with each other, which they value as a small town already. And I can talk to them about that as a strength that they can build on. So that, in a way, is a way of bringing sustainability and resilience into the conversation with the community without mentioning the terms, which is sometimes important. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Jada Bassi. Peter. Okay. So my name is Jada Bassi. I'm the manager of housing, community planning, and city spaces consulting, a small planning and development consulting firm based in Vancouver. I specialize in the areas of affordable housing and social policy. So I work with a lot of municipalities and other clients across the province of BC, sometimes Alberta, on creating citywide policies, land use plans, and feasibility studies. I'm happy to be part of this diverse panel, bringing different insights into what urban resilience is and what we all think it means. For me, I think urban resilience at its core is really about communities being able to adequately adapt to change. So I'm going to talk a bit about the social sustainability side to the urban resilience conversation, and hopefully it complements some of your other broader conversations on the climate change and environmental and economic side of this. And with social sustainability, specifically I want to talk about housing. So
So housing is one of the most basic community infrastructure that there is. Although it is very complicated, and it's also one of those more sensitive topics that we hear, especially around the Metro Vancouver region. With new housing developments, we see change manifest through a built form. And also for old homes that are retained, we see that symbolically change isn't actually happening. So we see both sides of those coins. But housing is a key component to urban resiliency, especially when responding to change in population. And that includes a change in population increase or decline, as well as change in demographics such as an aging population. This slide I have here is the housing continuum. It might be a bit difficult to see, but generally it categorizes the different types of housing from market housing to non-market housing. So on the market side of the continuum, we have home ownership. We also have market rental housing that's delivered through the private sector. Included in the side is rent subsidies for low-income households to help them offset the cost of market rental housing. And then we have the low end of market rental housing. On the non-market side, we have social housing, and that's affordable housing that's typically operated by nonprofit housing societies for low-income households who are able to live independently. Then we have supportive housing, which is also affordable, also typically operated by nonprofit housing societies, and typically for people who need a little bit more support, such as seniors assisted living. Then there's transitional housing. Again, it's affordable and typically operated by nonprofit housing societies, and typically geared towards persons who are experiencing crisis, such as those who are formerly homeless and maybe moving up the housing continuum. It also includes households such as women and children fleeing violence. And on the furthest side of the non-market side of the continuum is seasonal shelters and emergency year-round shelters. And in my opinion, I don't include shelters as a form of housing. I think those who are accessing shelters are not housed, or not adequately housed, but shelters are part of that overall housing continuum in communities.